The crimson scales of Zithrak caught the dying light of the binary suns as the massive dragons soared through the asteroid field surrounding the Kethvar system. Each powerful beat of his wings sent tremors through the smaller rocks floating in space, but his movements remained precise and controlled. Strapped securely to a specially designed harness between his shoulder blades sat Maya Chen, a human woman whose dark hair whipped around her face despite the environmental shield protecting them both. Maya pressed her hand against the communication device built into Zithrak's neck armor. "We're almost there, brother," she said through their neural link, her voice carrying both determination and concern. "Are you ready for this?" The dragon's mental voice rumbled through their connection, deep and filled with barely contained rage. "I have been ready for 7 Earth years, little sister. The Kethvar Council thought exiling me to the Outer Rim would break my spirit. They were wrong." Maya remembered that day clearly. She had been only 16 then, a refugee from a human colony ship that had been attacked by pirates. Zithrak had found her drifting in an escape pod, more dead than alive, and had taken her to the great crystal cities of Kethvar Prime. The dragon clans had reluctantly allowed her to stay, but only because Zithrak had claimed her as kin under the ancient protection laws. Most dragons viewed humans as little more than clever animals. The Kethvar were an ancient species, older than human civilization by millions of years. They possessed technology that seemed like magic, could manipulate matter with their minds, and had built an empire spanning 3 solar systems. To them, humans were newcomers who barely understood fire, let alone the cosmic forces that shaped the universe. But Zithrak had been different. He had seen something in Maya that others missed. While the other dragons dismissed human intelligence as primitive mimicry, Zithrak had watched Maya adapt to their technology with frightening speed. He had seen her solve problems that stumped even dragon scholars, using approaches that no Kethvar would have considered. The trouble had started when Maya began suggesting improvements to their defensive systems. The younger dragons had laughed, but Zithrak had quietly tested her ideas. When Maya's modifications increased shield efficiency by 30%, word had spread quickly through the clan hierarchies. Some dragons had been intrigued, but the Elder Council had been outraged. "A human dares to think she can improve upon million-year-old Kethvar engineering?" Elder Vorthak had thundered during the trial that followed. "And you, Zithrak, encourage this blasphemy?" Zithrak had stood before the assembled council, his crimson scales blazing with defiant fire. "I encourage wisdom wherever it is found. Maya's insights have already proven valuable. If we ignore useful knowledge because of its source, we become fools." Elder Vorthak's ancient eyes had gleamed with cold fury. "You forget your place, young dragon. Humans are pets at best, parasites at worst. This one has clearly corrupted your judgment. We offered tolerance for the charity case, but now she spreads her influence like a disease, making other humans believe they have something to contribute to Kethvar society." Maya had tried to speak in Zithrak's defense, but the dragons had refused to acknowledge her words. In their eyes, she was property defending its owner, nothing more. The irony was that Maya's improvements to their systems had actually saved lives when a real attack had come from the Void Hunters, a species of energy beings that fed on the life force of others. Her enhanced shields had held long enough for the Kethvar fleet to respond, but the Elder Council had ignored this evidence. They had declared Zithrak guilty of corruption by lesser species contact and sentenced him to exile in the dead systems beyond the Galactic Rim. Maya would remain on Kethvar Prime as a ward of the state, they had announced, for her own protection, of course. That was when Zithrak had shown them exactly why Crimson Dragons were considered the most dangerous of all the Kethvar bloodlines. "If you take my sister from me," Zithrak had said, his mental voice carrying the power of a solar storm, "I will return. And when I do, You will remember why your ancestors feared the Crimson Fire." The Elder Council had laughed. Ancient dragons did not fear anything, especially not the threats of one they considered corrupted. They had tried to force Zithrak to leave Maya behind, using their combined mental powers to compel obedience. They had failed to account for Maya herself. Human minds, it turned out, were remarkably resistant to Kethvar mental manipulation. Where dragon thoughts flowed in predictable patterns shaped by millions of years of evolution, human consciousness moved in chaotic, unpredictable ways that their ancient techniques could not easily control. Maya had not only resisted their mental commands, but had somehow created a feedback loop that had disrupted their efforts entirely. In the confusion that followed, Zithrak had grabbed Maya and blasted through the crystal dome of the council chamber, escaping into space before the other dragons could react. The pursuit had been fierce, but Zithrak knew the asteroid fields better than any of his kind. He had always been a loner, exploring the dangerous regions that other dragons avoided. For 7 years, they had lived in exile among the dead worlds and empty space between galaxies. Maya had grown from a confused teenager into a brilliant engineer and strategist. She had studied every piece of Kethvar technology Zithrak could find, learning not just how it worked, but how it could be improved. More importantly, she had learned how it could be turned against its creators. Zithrak had changed, too. Exile had hardened his already formidable abilities. He had fought void creatures in the spaces between stars, learned to survive on radiation and cosmic dust, and discovered powers within himself that even other crimson dragons had never developed. The isolation had also given him time to think, to plan, and to prepare for the day when he would return. "Look ahead, brother," Maya said now, pointing toward a distant speck of light that was growing larger. "Kethvar Prime. They won't be expecting us." "They should be," Zithrak replied. "I promised I would return." Maya smiled grimly. "You promised to return. But they think we're still the same dragon and human who left 7 years ago. They have no idea what we've become." The speck of light resolved into a massive space station, one of the outer monitoring posts that protected the Kethvar system. It was shaped like a crystal flower, its petals spreading wide to accommodate the various sensor arrays and defensive weapons. Normally, such a station would challenge any approaching vessel, demanding identification and purpose. Today, the station remained silent. Its sensors were active, but they were not detecting anything approaching. Maya's new stealth technology, based on principles she had discovered while studying the way void creatures move through space, had rendered them effectively invisible. "The funny thing is," Maya said as they drifted past the station, "they were right about one thing. I did learn a lot from studying their technology, just not in the way they expected." Zithrak felt a fierce pride in his sister's accomplishments. 7 years ago, she had been clever but untrained. Now she was a master of technologies that the Kethvar themselves did not fully understand. She had taken their million-year-old engineering and found ways to improve it that their rigid thinking could never have conceived. "What they never understood," Maya continued, "is that human minds don't work like dragon minds. You think in terms of perfecting what already exists. We think in terms of tearing everything apart and rebuilding it completely. That's why they were so scared of me back then. Not because I was smart, but because I was smart in a way they couldn't predict or control." As they passed the outer defenses undetected, Maya began activating the various systems she had built during their exile. Some were improvements to Zithrak's natural abilities, amplifying his fire and enhancing his already impressive speed. Others were weapons designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in Kethvar technology that only a human mind could have discovered. "Remember the plan," Maya said. "We're not here to destroy everything. We're here to make them understand what they threw away when they exiled us. Some of them might even be smart enough to listen." Zithrak's mental laugh was like the sound of a distant volcano. And if they are not? Then we remind them why crimson dragons were feared, Maya replied. But we do it my way. Humans don't just defeat their enemies. We make them wish they had been our friends instead. The inner system lay ahead of them now, the great crystal cities of Kethvar Prime glittering like jewels in the light of the twin suns. Somewhere down there, the Elder Council continued their ancient deliberations, secure in the knowledge that their power was absolute and their wisdom unquestioned. They were about to learn otherwise. Maya checked her equipment one final time, then settled back against Zithrak's armored hide. Let's go home, brother. Time to collect what they owe us. The crimson dragon's wings beat harder, carrying them toward their destiny and the reckoning that was 7 years overdue. The crystal spires of Kethvar Prime stretched impossibly high into the purple sky, their surfaces gleaming with the same technology that had awed Maya as a teenager. Now, 7 years older and infinitely wiser, she saw them differently. Where once she had seen perfection, she now saw stagnation. Where once she had seen power, she now saw vulnerability. The Central Council chamber is still in the same location, Maya observed, studying the readings from her scanner. Third spire from the left, about 2,000 meters up. They haven't changed their security protocols either. Zithrak's massive form cut through the atmosphere like a crimson comet, but still no alarms sounded. Maya's stealth technology was holding perfectly. Their arrogance blinds them, the dragon replied through their link. They cannot imagine that anything they built could be improved upon. That's what makes humans so dangerous to them, Maya said, making final adjustments to her gear. We don't just use their technology, we make it better. As they approached the council spire, Maya activated the first of her surprises. The crystal walls of the tower began to resonate at a frequency that made the ancient dragons inside extremely uncomfortable. It was a subtle effect, not quite painful but impossible to ignore, like having water in your ears that you couldn't clear. Elder Vorthak was in the middle of a speech about maintaining traditional values when the resonance hit him. The ancient dragon stumbled mid-sentence, his usual commanding presence wavering. Around the circular chamber, other elders shifted uncomfortably on their crystalline perches. "What is this disturbance?" Elder Vorthak demanded, his mental voice carrying notes of confusion and growing alarm. That was when Zithrak materialized in the center of the chamber. The stealth field dropped away like a discarded cloak, revealing the crimson dragon in all his terrible glory. But the creature that appeared before the Elder Council was not the same dragon they had exiled 7 years before. Zithrak had grown larger, his scales gleaming with an inner fire that spoke of powers developed far beyond the normal range of his kind. Strange markings covered his hide, symbols that looked almost like circuit patterns but moved and shifted as if alive. But it was what he carried that truly shocked the assembled elders. Maya Chen stood on his back, no longer strapped into a harness but moving freely across the dragon's armored hide as if it were solid ground. Her clothing was unlike anything they had seen before, a seamless blend of technology and fabric that seemed to shift and adapt to her movements. In her hands, she held devices that the dragons did not recognize, but instinctively feared. "Hello, honored elders," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite the vast space. "We've come home." Elder Vorthak's shock quickly turned to rage. "Impossible! Our sensors detect nothing. You cannot be here." Maya smiled, and there was something in that expression that made several of the younger elders step backward. "Your sensors are working perfectly. They're just seeing what I want them to see. Human technology, built on Kethvar principles, but improved beyond your understanding." "Blasphemy!" Elder Vorthak roared, his ancient form beginning to glow with the power he was gathering. "You dare corrupt our sacred knowledge with your primitive additions?" Primitive? Maya laughed, and the sound echoed strangely through the chamber. Let me show you primitive. She pressed a control on one of her devices, and suddenly every piece of technology in the chamber began to malfunction. The lighting flickered, the communication system squealed with feedback, and most importantly, the mental amplifiers that the elders used to project their power began to shut down one by one. "What have you done?" Elder Vorthak demanded, but his voice was noticeably weaker without the technological enhancement. "I've introduced a virus into your networks," Maya explained calmly. "Not a destructive one, just something that makes your systems actually work efficiently instead of wasting 90% of their energy on redundant processes. You see, the problem with your technology isn't that it's bad, it's that it's wasteful. You've had so much power for so long that you never bothered to optimize anything." Around the chamber, other elders were trying to use their abilities to counter whatever Maya had done, but they found their efforts strangely ineffective. The human woman seemed to anticipate every move they made, countering their mental attacks with defenses they did not understand. "Impossible," whispered Elder Thys, one of the youngest council members. "How can a human mind resist our combined will?" Maya tilted her head, studying the dragon with interest. "That's the question that's been bothering you for 7 years, isn't it? How can a supposedly inferior species do things that you can't? The answer is simple. We think differently." She gestured to Zithrak, who had remained silent but watchful throughout the exchange. "Your brother here understood that from the beginning. He didn't try to make me think like a dragon. He let me think like a human. And a human mind combined with dragon power creates something new, something better." Elder Vorthak was gathering his strength for a massive mental assault, the kind that could shatter mountains or boil oceans. "We will not be lectured by a pet," he thundered. The attack came like a tsunami of pure thought, designed to overwhelm Maya's mind and leave her a drooling shell. It was the kind of power that had conquered worlds and bent entire species to the Kethvar will. It hit Maya's defenses and simply vanished. The silence that followed was deafening. Elder Vorthak stared in disbelief at the human woman who stood completely unaffected by an attack that should have destroyed her utterly. "Here's what you never understood about humans," Maya said conversationally. "We're not just resistant to mental manipulation. We're immune to it, if we know it's coming. Our minds don't work like yours. You think in straight lines, following patterns established over millions of years. We think in chaos, in creativity, in constant adaptation. Your attacks assume a target that thinks like you do. But I don't." She held up another device, this one glowing with a soft blue light. "This is a human invention, based on studying your own mental patterns. It doesn't attack your minds directly. Instead, it shows you something that dragon brains are fundamentally incapable of processing." "What could possibly—" Elder Vorthak began. Maya activated the device, and suddenly every elder in the chamber was seeing through human eyes, not literally, but conceptually. For just a moment, their ancient, ordered minds were forced to experience the chaotic, creative, constantly shifting perspective that was human consciousness. The effect was immediate and devastating. Several elders collapsed entirely, their minds unable to cope with the alien way of thinking. Others began making sounds of distress, their carefully maintained composure shattered by the experience of thoughts that moved in directions they had never imagined possible. Elder Vorthak managed to remain standing, but his mental voice was shaky when he spoke. What are you?" "I'm what you could have had if you'd been wise enough to listen," Maya replied. "Zithrak saw it 7 years ago. Humans and dragons working together don't just add their strengths, they multiply them. A dragon's power guided by human creativity. Human adaptability enhanced by dragon wisdom. But you were too proud to see it." She looked around the chamber at the humbled elders. You want to know why we're really here? It's not for revenge. Revenge is simple. We're here because there's something coming that's going to require everything we can manage, working together. Zithrak finally spoke, his mental voice carrying harmonics that made the crystal walls ring like bells. The Void Hunters have found this galaxy. What you defeated 7 years ago was just a scouting force. The real invasion begins in 6 months. Elder Thys struggled to her feet. Impossible. We drove them away completely. You drove away a tiny fraction of their forces, Maya corrected. I know, because I've been tracking their movements for 3 years. They're coming with a fleet that will make their previous attack look like a minor raid, and your current defenses won't stop them. She gestured to the malfunctioning technology around them. This is just a demonstration. I can improve your shield efficiency by 400%. I can make your weapons hit targets that are in different dimensions. I can give you detection systems that will track enemies through folded space. But I can't do it alone, and I can't do it if you're too stubborn to accept help from a primitive human. Elder Vorthak was still reeling from the mental assault Maya had subjected him to, but his voice carried a note of desperate hope. You would help us? After what we did to you? Maya smiled, but there was steel in her expression. I would help you because it's the right thing to do. Because there are millions of innocent dragons on this world who don't deserve to die for their leader's mistakes. And because if you fall, humanity falls too. The Void Hunters don't make distinctions between species. She paused, letting that sink in. But I have conditions. Elder Vorthak straightened slightly. Even humbled, he was still an ancient dragon with pride. Name them. First, Zithrak and I are pardoned for any supposed crimes. We're not criminals. We're refugees who were driven from their home for the crime of thinking differently. The elder nodded slowly. Second, humans are granted equal status in Kethvar society, not as pets or curiosities, but as partners. What happened to me can never happen to another human child. This was harder to accept, but Elder Vorthak nodded again. Third, Maya's voice became harder. You acknowledge that human knowledge and human ways of thinking have value. Your ancient wisdom is impressive, but it's incomplete. You need us as much as we need you. The chamber fell silent. This was asking the Kethvar to admit that their million-year-old civilization was somehow lacking, that creatures they had dismissed as barely sentient animals had something to teach them. Finally, Elder Thys spoke up. If what you say about the Void Hunters is true, we may not have a choice. You always have a choice, Maya replied. You can accept that the universe is bigger than your pride, or you can face the invasion alone and lose everything you've built. But choose quickly. We have 6 months to prepare, and I have a lot of work to do. Elder Vorthak looked around at his fellow council members, seeing the fear and confusion in their ancient eyes. Then he looked at Maya, standing confidently on her dragon partner's back, clearly the equal of any being in the chamber despite her supposed inferiority. What do you need from us? He asked quietly. Maya's smile became genuine for the first time since they had arrived. Everything you have, and the wisdom to let me make it better. 6 months later, Maya stood in the command center of the newly redesigned Kethvar Defense Network, watching as waves of Void Hunters crashed against shields that held firm where the old defenses would have failed in minutes. Around her, dragons and humans worked side by side at control stations that combined the best of both species' technologies and thinking patterns. Shield efficiency holding at 98%, reported Commander Thys, the former elder who had become Maya's closest ally among the dragon leadership. Your modifications are performing even better than projected. Maya nodded, but her attention was focused on the tactical display showing the battle raging in space above them. The Void Hunters had indeed come in force, just as she had predicted. Their fleet stretched across half the solar system, ships of living energy that fed on the life force of anything they could reach. But for the first time in the long war between the species, they were meeting resistance they couldn't simply consume. "Zithrak, how are our mobile units performing?" Maya asked through their neural link. The Crimson Dragon's response came from somewhere in the asteroid field where he was leading a squadron of volunteer dragon pilots. "Better than I dared hope, sister. The human pilots you trained are adapting faster than even I expected. They think like you do, finding angles of attack that the Void Hunters cannot predict." Maya smiled with pride. Teaching humans to work with dragon technology had been challenging, but the results were extraordinary. Human creativity combined with dragon power created tactical possibilities that neither species could have achieved alone. More importantly, it had shown both species something they had forgotten, that strength came not from domination, but from cooperation. "Maya," called Dr. James Wright, the human scientist who had become her second in command. "We're getting reports from the outer perimeter. The Void Hunters are trying a new approach." Maya moved to his station, studying the data streams flowing across multiple screens. Where the old Kethvar displays showed only basic tactical information, her new systems provided a complete picture of the battle in real time, updated continuously by a network of human and dragon observers working in perfect synchronization. "They're adapting faster than we expected," Maya observed. "Look at this pattern here. They're trying to phase their attacks to match our shield frequencies." Elder Vorthak, who had insisted on remaining in the command center despite his advanced age, moved closer to study the display. The ancient dragon had changed dramatically over the past 6 months. Where once he had been rigid and proud, he had become genuinely curious about the new possibilities that human-dragon cooperation created. "In the old days, we would have simply increased power to the shields," he said thoughtfully. "But you taught us that power, without efficiency, is waste." "Exactly," Maya replied, her fingers dancing across her control interface. "Instead of fighting harder, we fight smarter." She activated a new protocol she had developed just for this scenario. Across the Kethvar defense network, the shield frequencies began shifting in patterns that appeared random but were actually based on human music theory. The Void Hunters, who thought in terms of energy and consumption, found themselves unable to match frequencies that changed according to artistic principles rather than mathematical ones. "Brilliant," whispered Dr. Wright. "They can analyze our technology, but they can't analyze our creativity." The battle continued for hours, with the Void Hunters throwing attack after attack against defenses that adapted faster than they could counter. But Maya knew that this was just the beginning. The real test of what they had built together would come when the Void Hunter command ship finally decided to enter the battle directly. As if summoned by her thoughts, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. On the main display, a massive shape began materializing near the edge of the system. It was enormous, easily the size of a moon, and it radiated power that made even the largest Kethvar battle stations seem insignificant by comparison. "The Devourer," Elder Vorthak said quietly. "I had hoped the reports were exaggerated." Maya studied the readings streaming in from their sensor networks. The Void Hunter flagship was indeed impressive, but her human mind was already analyzing its weaknesses. "It's big," she acknowledged, "but big means slow, and slow means predictable." "Maya," Zithrak's voice came through the link with a note of concern. "That thing just destroyed 3 of our outer monitoring stations without even slowing down. Our weapons aren't even scratching its shields." "That's because we're using the wrong weapons," Maya replied calmly. She turned to address the entire command center. "All ships, fall back to defensive positions around Kethvar Prime. Activate Protocol 7. Dr. Wright looked puzzled. "Protocol 7? But that's just theoretical. We've never tested it on anything that large." Then today we find out if human theory works better than dragon tradition, Maya said with a grin that was equal parts confidence and reckless determination. Protocol 7 was Maya's most ambitious creation, a weapon system that combined human understanding of quantum mechanics with dragon mastery over matter and energy. Instead of trying to overpower the Void Hunter shields, it would phase-shift their own attacks to a different dimensional frequency, allowing them to strike at the creature's energy matrices directly. All human dragon teams initiate dimensional targeting, Maya broadcast to the fleet. Remember your training. Don't think about what's supposed to be impossible. Think about what needs to happen and make it happen. Around the system, mixed crews of humans and dragons began implementing tactics that would have been considered pure fantasy just 6 months earlier. Human pilots guided their ships through folded space, while their dragon partners provided the raw power needed to maintain the dimensional shifts. Dragon wisdom identified the most effective targets, while human creativity found ways to reach them. The Devourer began its approach toward Kethvar Prime, its massive bulk moving with deceptive speed. Lesser Void Hunters swarmed around it like pilot fish around a shark, feeding on the energy it radiated and growing stronger with each passing moment. "This is it," Maya announced to the command center. "Everything we've built, everything we've learned, comes down to the next few minutes." She activated her personal link to every human and dragon in the defense fleet. 7 months ago, most of you thought humans and dragons had nothing in common. Some of you believed humans were too primitive to contribute anything meaningful. Others thought dragons were too proud to change their ways. Today, we prove that both species are stronger together than either ever was alone. The Devourer reached weapons range and began its attack. Energy beams capable of cracking planets lanced out toward the Kethvar defenses. But instead of meeting solid shields, they encountered Maya's adaptive barrier system. The beams struck surfaces that bent space around them, redirecting the attacks back at the Void Hunter fleet. "It's working!" Dr. Wright shouted. "The dimensional reflection protocols are holding." But Maya knew the real battle was just beginning. The Devourer was powerful, but it was also intelligent. It was already adapting to their new tactics, finding ways to counter the dimensional shifts and breakthrough points in their defenses. "Zithrak," Maya called through their link, "I need you to do something crazy." "Tell me," the dragon replied without hesitation. "I need you to get inside that thing's shields, close enough to deploy the quantum resonator." There was a moment of silence. "Sister, that is not crazy. That is suicide." "Not if we do it right," Maya insisted. "I've been studying their shield harmonics. There's a brief window every 37 seconds when they cycle their frequencies. If you can phase shift at exactly the right moment, I can get through," Zithrak finished. "But deploying the resonator means getting to their power core. Even if I survive the approach, the feedback will likely kill me." Maya's voice softened. "I know. That's why I'm going with you." "Absolutely not," Zithrak replied immediately. "You are too valuable to risk." "We're family," Maya interrupted. "We go together or not at all." Around the command center, dragons and humans alike listened to the exchange with growing amazement. The bond between the human woman and the Crimson Dragon was unlike anything in Kethvar history, and it was about to be tested in the ultimate way. Elder Vorthak stepped forward. "There must be another option. Some way to deploy the weapon without sacrificing yourselves." Maya shook her head. "The quantum resonator has to be placed by hand at the exact center of their power matrix. It takes human intuition to find the right spot and dragon strength to survive the energy discharges long enough to place it. This is what we trained for." She looked around at the faces surrounding her, seeing acceptance and determination where once there had been suspicion and fear. "Besides, this isn't about sacrifice. This is about showing the universe that when humans and dragons work together, nothing is impossible." Dr. Wright was frantically checking his calculations. Maya, I'm showing a 12% chance of survival if you can reach the power core. 12%? Maya laughed. James, 6 months ago you would have said there was 0% chance of any of this working. I like our odds. She moved to the center of the command center, where a special platform had been constructed for her most dangerous experiments. Initiate emergency protocols. If this doesn't work, fall back to the secondary defensive line and hold as long as you can. And if it does work? Elder Thiss asked. Maya grinned. Then we'll have shown the galaxy something new, that humans and dragons together can overcome anything. She stepped onto the platform as Zithrak materialized around her, his form shifting from physical matter to pure energy as he prepared for the dimensional transit. Through their neural link, Maya could feel his determination matching her own. Ready, sister? Ready, brother. Let's go save the galaxy. The platform erupted in crimson fire as Zithrak launched himself toward the Devourer at speeds that bent space around them. Behind them, the combined human-dragon fleet maintained their defensive positions, buying time and providing covering fire for the desperate mission. Inside the Void Hunter flagship, alarms began sounding as sensors detected the approaching threat, but the warnings came too late. Zithrak and Maya materialized in the creature's power core just as Maya triggered the quantum resonator. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Devourer's own power turned against it, creating a cascade failure that spread through its entire energy matrix. The massive creature writhed in space, its death throes sending shock waves through the Void Hunter fleet. As the flagship died, its destruction sent a message across subspace that could be felt by Void Hunters throughout the galaxy. The HFY system had become too dangerous to attack. The creatures that had terrorized space for millions of years turned and fled, seeking easier prey elsewhere. In the aftermath, rescue teams found Zithrak and Maya floating unconscious in an escape pod that the dragon had somehow created around them during the explosion. They were battered and exhausted, but alive. Weeks later, as the HFY system celebrated its greatest victory in recorded history, Maya stood once again in the Crystal Council chamber. But this time, she was not an exile returning for vengeance. She was a hero being honored for saving 2 species and forging a new path forward. The universe is vast, she said to the assembled dragons and humans who now worked together as equals, and full of challenges we cannot imagine. But I know that whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Because that's what family does. Elder Vorthak, now wearing the modified technology that allowed him to think with both dragon wisdom and human creativity, nodded solemnly. The exile is ended. Welcome home, daughter of 2 worlds. Maya smiled, feeling Zithrak's pride and love through their eternal bond. They had returned seeking vengeance, but had found something far more valuable. They had found a way to build something better than what had come before, proving that the greatest human strength was not the ability to destroy their enemies, but the wisdom to turn those enemies into allies. In the end, that was the most human thing of all.